Let me ask you something. You've seen shortages before. Maybe in the field. Maybe after a storm. Maybe when the shelves went bare back in 2020, and suddenly everyone realized they weren't as prepared as they thought. Right now, quietly, without headlines. Without panic, preppers and veterans across the country are clearing specific shelves at grocery stores. Not rice. Not the obvious stuff everyone tells you to grab. 11 specific items. And if you walked past those shelves today, you'd have no idea anything was wrong. In the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through all 11, the real reason each one is disappearing, and what you can do about it this week before the window closes. Let's get into it. 11. Canned sardines and mackerel. We start with the item that has the clearest numbers behind it. 3 years ago, a quality tin of sardines and olive oil, same brand, same size, cost around $2. Today, that exact same can runs $4 or more. That is a 100% price increase in 3 years. Regional grocery chains across multiple states are reporting sardine and mackerel shelves that are partially stocked or completely bare. Not as a one-time event. As a pattern. A repeating pattern with no clear end date. The reason comes down to 2 words: quota cuts. Major international fisheries have formally reduced their sardine and mackerel catch limits. Not voluntarily. Now here is why a combat veteran or anyone serious about long-term preparedness should care. 1 can of sardines delivers high-quality protein, significant dietary fat, and omega-3 concentrations that exceed most fish oil supplements. Omega-3's deficiency, measurable in weeks, not months, directly degrades focus, mood stability, and immune function. In a long stretch without fresh food access, that matters more than most people realize until they're in it. Go for olive oil, packed. 3 to 5 year shelf life. The price trend alone makes the case for buying ahead now. 10. Canned tomato paste. Under $1 a can. No problems for decades. So how is this disappearing? Here's one number you need to know. 95%. That is the documented share of all processed tomatoes in the United States, grown in a single region, California's Central Valley. Not roughly, not approximately. 95% from one geographic zone. Rising labor costs and operational expenses that have pushed smaller tomato growers out of the business entirely. And here's the hard truth. There is no domestic backup. When California output drops, you cannot shift sourcing. The processors don't exist anywhere else at the required scale. Then, add rising steel and aluminum costs, driving up packaging expenses. When margins tighten, food companies cut production on low-margin items first. Grocery procurement managers are already describing back orders running 6 weeks or longer. Strategically, this item is irreplaceable. Rice and beans become chili. Canned vegetables become soup. 9. Bulk yeast. Most people have never stopped to ask where yeast actually comes from or how few facilities make it. Yeast production in North America is concentrated in a small number of highly specialized plants. It is not a product you scale up overnight. Yeast is a living organism, in precise temperature management through every stage of production and distribution. When demand outpaces those facilities, the gap doesn't close in days. It closes in months. When home baking surged in 2020, manufacturers scaled up. When that wave cooled, they scaled back. But the habit of baking at home did not fully disappear. Production capacity has largely reverted to pre-2020 levels. The numbers don't line up. Here is what most people don't know about storage. Friends in, close to 2 years. But vacuum-sealed commercial yeast in 1-pound blocks stored in a freezer holds full viability for 5 years or longer. Each block is the functional equivalent of more than 60 individual packets at a fraction of the cost per unit. And yeast is one of the most foundational things you can produce for household food independence. Without viable yeast, that capability disappears. 8. Cooking oil, gallon jugs. 2 years ago, a 1-gallon jug of vegetable oil ran about $6 at most major chains. Availability of large format containers, specifically, the gallon jug, has become genuinely inconsistent. Not low in stock. Not 1 or 2 left. Gone. Multiple store chains. Different regions. Same story. The causes stack. Ukraine was historically one of the largest global exporters of sunflower oil. That supply has been severely disrupted. Palm oil faces output restrictions and increasing regulatory pressure in key producing countries. Soybean prices have climbed. These are structural shifts, not temporary disruptions. Here is the piece most people skip until it matters. Dietary fat is not optional. Your body requires it to absorb fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. It requires it for hormone production and sustained neurological function. Most core pantry staples, rice, beans, grains, canned vegetables, contain almost no fat. A food supply built around those items without adequate fat will produce real nutritional deficiencies within weeks. Regardless of calorie count, A single tablespoon of cooking oil delivers around 120 calories of pure fat. A gallon contains roughly 30,000 calories at about $13. That's less than half a cent per calorie. Emergency food products cost 5 to 10 times that per calorie. Rotation system, keep 1 to 2 gallons stored. Pull the oldest every 2 months. Replace immediately. Add coconut oil alongside it, 2 to 3 year stability at room temperature. No rotation needed. 7. Bulk bouillon cubes. A cube the size of a sugar cube weighs almost nothing. Costs almost nothing. Costs almost nothing. Most people see it and think, nice extra, not essential. That framing is the mistake. 1 cube produces roughly 1 cup of seasoned broth for about 5 cents. Canned broth costs around $2 per can for the same volume. That is 40 times the cost for an identical result. 200 bouillon cubes fit in a container roughly the size of a shoebox. 200 cups of equivalent canned broth would occupy significant shelf space and require dozens of heavy cans. But the economics are not the main point. Plain white rice cooked in bouillon broth is a completely different eating experience from plain white rice cooked in water. Canned beans simmered with bouillon, and a small amount of fat become an actual meal. This one ingredient functions as a flavor multiplier across your entire pantry. There is a well-documented psychological effect that builds during extended periods of restricted eating. It is not hunger, it is monotony. Research on morale during extended food restriction, including in military and humanitarian contexts, consistently shows that flavor variety is one of the most effective, practical interventions available. 800 cubes, 400 chicken, 400 beef, costs around $60 total. That is 800 servings of broth at roughly 7 cents each. The problem? Bulk format containers of 200 cubes or more are increasingly difficult to find. Warehouse stores that carried them reliably are now showing empty shelves with no restock dates posted. When bulk bouillon is available by more than you planned. 6. Shelf-stable bacon. Fully cooked, vacuum-sealed, no refrigeration required. 80-month shelf life. The first reaction most people have is skepticism. That's fair. 30 seconds in a pan changes the impression quickly. The smell fills the room. It's real bacon. Not the best you've ever had, but in the context of a limited food supply, that distinction carries more weight than it sounds. Most staple emergency foods are carbohydrate-heavy and nearly fat-free. Rice, beans, pasta, canned vegetables, almost no fat in any of them. Shelf-stable bacon changes the nutritional profile of every meal it touches. Caloric density, dietary fat, satiety. When your body is running on rice and beans for days straight, that matters. There is also the psychological dimension, and I want to be direct about this because it applies to anyone who is served. In prolonged situations where food variety is severely restricted, monotony builds quietly. It wears down morale before anyone names it. Sensory familiarity, a recognizable smell. A familiar taste is one of the most effective ways to maintain emotional stability under sustained stress. Bacon's aroma is one of the strongest, appetite-triggering scents in the food world. It changes the feeling of a meal, not just the flavor. Several brands producing this reliably just 12 to 18 months ago have moved to backorder status or quietly discontinued the product. When manufacturers are contacted about inventory timelines, responses are vague. No resolution date given. When a company cannot tell you when a product is coming back, they genuinely don't know. That is a different kind of signal than a standard backorder. The availability window is narrowing. Why it's still straightforward to find 5 canned butter. Most people have never bought this. There are only 3 major producers in the United States, manufacturing genuine. Conditions right now are not normal. 2 of those 3 producers have recently run into serious operational problems. The second is struggling not with butter itself, but with a shortage of the actual metal cans needed to package the product. Rising demand meeting shrinking supply from 2 of the 3 producers in the entire market. That is the formula for a shortage. Refrigerator butter starts degrading within 3 to 4 weeks. Even frozen butter develops freezer burn and loses flavor after about 6 months. One can typically holds the equivalent of 3 standard sticks. If this has been on your radar at all, that window is narrowing faster than most people realize. Here is something worth understanding about how real food shortages actually begin. They don't start with headlines. They don't start with empty shelves across every store at once. They start with small, easy-to-explain gaps. A partially filled row, an out-of-stock tag that eventually stops getting replaced at all. The reason traces back to how dairy processors prioritize production under pressure. When a facility is constrained by staffing shortages or rising input costs, capacity goes to high-margin products first. Fresh milk and cheese generate significantly more revenue. The pull tab detail is not minor. In any situation where normal routines are disrupted, a power outage, an evacuation, it will not sound trivial 3 days into a power outage. Works in coffee, baking, soup, sauces, or reconstituted as regular milk. For households with children, elderly family members, or anyone dependent on dairy protein, having a shelf-stable option with no refrigeration requirement carries real weight. 3. Bulk yeast, powdered milk. This one is on almost no one's radar, and that's exactly the problem. Because when supply tightens, bulk packaging gets cut first. Same reason as the bouillon, same reason as the cooking oil. Powdered whole milk reconstituted provides complete protein, calcium, properly stored in a cool, dry, sealed container. You are looking at a decade or more of usability without meaningful degradation. Most shelf-stable emergency staples provide neither. Powdered milk fills that gap in a way very few other shelf-stable products can match. It also functions as a baking ingredient, a base for sauces, in addition to coffee, and a protein supplement when mixed with other foods. The versatility is high. The cost per serving is low. And the large format containers, the ones that actually make sense for a real reserve, are becoming harder to source at a reasonable price. White rice, Mylar sealed, bulk format. You've heard rice your whole life as the prepper staple, but here's the specific piece most people get wrong, and it's the piece that bulk white rice stored in standard buckets or bags has a real-world shelf life of 2 to 4 years before quality degrades, palatability drops. Texture becomes wrong, and in humid conditions, pests and moisture get in. That is not a long-term food reserve. White rice sealed in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers and stored in 5-gallon buckets has a documented shelf life of completely different outcome based entirely on packaging. Availability of pre-packaged Mylar sealed bulk rice from reliable suppliers has become increasingly inconsistent. What used to ship in days is now quoting 3 to 6 weeks. Some SKSs are on indefinite back. 1 cup of dry white rice yields approximately 600 calories when cooked. A 5-gallon bucket holds roughly 33 pounds of rice, that is approximately 50,000 calories per bucket. This is the foundation. Honey, large format containers. In the literal chemical sense, honey has a water activity level too low to allow microbial growth. It naturally produces trace amounts of hydrogen peroxide through enzymatic activity, which provides additional antimicrobial protection. Archaeologists have recovered honey from ancient Egyptian tombs, estimated at over 3,000 years old. When tested, still chemically intact, still edible. 3,000 years. Nothing else in your pantry is in the same category. Now here's where the problem is. But large multi-pound containers, 5-pound jugs, are increasingly showing up out of stock, or priced significantly higher than they were just 2 years ago. 2 factors are converging at the same time. First, domestic bee colony collapse continues to reduce the productivity of American honeybee populations. Researchers have identified multiple contributing causes: pesticide exposure, habitat loss, parasites, and pathogens. Overall colony productivity remains well below historical norms. Second, import scrutiny on international honey has increased sharply due to documented adulteration, the practice of diluting honey with cheaper sweeteners like corn syrup and relabeling it as pure. Honey's antibacterial properties are not folk medicine. Medical grade honey is actively used in clinical wound care worldwide. It functions as a natural cough suppressant with peer-reviewed studies supporting its effectiveness against over-the-counter alternatives. No rotation required. No degradation. Buy the large format when you find it. Buy more than you think you need. And do it this week, not after the next shortage makes the news. Here is what ties all 11 of these items together and why this list looks the way it does. Rice provides carbohydrates and almost no fat. Canned vegetables provide micronutrients and minimal calories. Beans provide protein, but they need fat and flavor to remain sustainably edible for more than a few days in a row. The 11 items on this list: cooking oil, bacon, bouillon, butter, yeast, sardines, tomato paste, evaporated milk, powdered milk, rice, honey, are the ones that make a food reserve function as an actual diet, not just a calorie count. That distinction is the entire difference between a reserve you can actually live on and a reserve that breaks down in week 2. This is not a prediction of collapse. This is not an argument for extreme stockpiling. This is a straightforward observation. Supply vulnerabilities are real, prices are rising, and the people who will be in the best position 6 months from now are the ones who acted while things still looked mostly fine. On each of your next 3 shopping trips, add 2 items from this list to your cart. 2 items, done consistently over 3 trips, you will have built a real, usable buffer, not a stockpile built on anxiety. A practical reserve that insulates your household from the spot shortages and price spikes that are already becoming routine. The window to act is right now, not when the shelves are visibly empty, not when the news starts covering it. Right now, when acting is still easy, which item on this list are you picking up first? And if this kind of content is useful to you, subscribe. We publish this type of breakdown regularly. See you in the next one.